Hello everyone, good morning and a very warm welcome to our webinar all around getting your payroll done in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and this morning we're joined by my colleague Paddy, who is standing by in the background, ready and waiting to answer your questions. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to start off with a brief section on preparing to process a pay run, where I'll run through some tasks to complete before you would process your payroll. And for more information on these tasks, we have linked to some of our articles, and we are running some additional webinars this month that gives more detail on some of the things in that checklist. For the main demo today, though, we're going to be processing a payroll. So I'm going to run through a typical pay run, start to finish, highlighting 5 of your key tasks. And I'm also going to explain where other tasks fit in and around that process. Once we've completed that payroll, I'll run through the month-end procedure, including how to run a P32 report and submit an EPS where needed. And then at the end, I'll go through the further support available to you, including useful resources such as other webinars we're running, our help centre and Sage University. So that's what we've got lined up. Let's get straight on with our first section, looking at preparing to process a payroll. Now, for this section, I'm not going to give you any demos, but I will run you through a 4-step checklist. So the first thing to do before processing your payroll is to add any new starters for employees that have joined you since the last payroll that you ran. Now, they will have with them, hopefully, either a P45 from their previous employer, or you can get them to fill in a starter checklist, which is what used to be known as a P46. So that's a really useful form, and I've included a link on where to download that from the gov.uk website. And then you would use the information on either the P45 or starter checklist to set up your new employee record. Second step, if applicable, is to enter any absences that would qualify for a statutory payment. So we're talking sickness, maternity, or paternity, being the main examples, but also adoption, shared parental leave, etc. Now, by recording the absence details, the statutory payment will automatically calculate, and I'll show you where to check this when we go through the demonstration. Step 3 is to mark any employees who are not being paid on hold. So we are referring to perhaps casual employees that don't work all the year round, who are still on your payroll and haven't left the business. And by marking them on hold, it just ensures that you don't accidentally include them in a pay run where they're not being paid. And it also allows you to submit the fact that they're an irregularly paid employee to HMRC in your FPS. And then the last step is to check your secure mailbox if you receive tax coding notices online, or check for any paper notices that you've received in the post, and make sure you've updated information such as tax codes and student loan notices if you've received any of those changes from HMRC. And we do have a webinar all around the integrated HMRC secure mailbox, which we are running later this month. So those are the 4 steps in your preparation checklist. What we're now going to move on to is the main part of the webinar, where we're going to show you how to get your payroll done. So I'm going to run you through a payroll process, and I'm going to focus on the following key tasks. So as you can see from the slide, we start on the left-hand side by setting our process date. We're then going to go through entering the payments for the current period. We'll produce pay slips and reports. We're then going to update the records, which in effect finalizes the payroll and adds it to the employee's history. And then the final step is submitting that payment information to HMRC, which you'll be doing as part of a full payment submission. So first step is setting the process date. And this is the date that will be reported to HMRC as the pay date for your employees. And it also determines the tax period for calculations of PAYE and national insurance. It's important that you enter the date that your employees receive their pay rather than the date that they've worked up to. The only exception to this rule being where the regular pay date falls on a non-banking day, in which case you would still report the regular pay date as the pay date, but you would pay your employee on either an earlier or later banking day. So what I'll do is I'll just bring these slides down as we start off the demonstration, and I'll switch the camera off just to give you a closer look at my screen. Now, as you can see, I'm already logged into Sage Payroll, and we're going to be following the tasks within the Payroll navigation group. So I've selected Payroll down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and you'll see there are tasks that are running from the top, starting with change process date, all the way down to the bottom. So if you're ever in doubt as to what order you complete your tasks in, a good rule of thumb is you start at the top and work your way down. Now, another way to follow these steps is to use the process map, which you can switch on in your program by clicking on the View option here at the top of the screen, coming down to Change View, and then selecting Process Map. And you'll see that appears just underneath the list of employees, and you can resize the screens like so by dragging this little slider. And you would follow the tasks on the process map, starting on the left-hand side and then working your way over to the right. Now, this might look a little daunting if you're new to the software, but you won't be running every one of these tasks. And I'm going to focus on 5 of the key tasks today. But it is a good reminder of what order you do things in if you are using that process map. So that was switched on from the View menu, Change View, and then you click Process Map. Now, let's start by setting the process date. So I'm going to use the payroll task to change the process date. It has defaulted to today's date when I logged into payroll, but the date that my employees receive their pay is always the last calendar day of the month. So I'm just going to use the calendar to select my employees' regular pay date, which will be the 31st of July in this case. And you can see that it confirms the tax month, which is tax month 4, and the tax year, 24 to 25, just underneath. And if you're happy with that process date, you can click OK to save it. And you can now see that date appearing in the bottom right-hand corner here on the status bar. So that's the process date set. What we would now need to do is to select the employees that we need to pay. Now, the way that you do this depends on how complicated your payroll is. In my example, I have monthly paid employees. That's the only pay frequency that I process. They all get paid on the same day of the month, and I process my payroll for everyone at the same time. So what I can do is I can see all of my employees in view, and to select them all, I can click Clear and then Swap. Now, if you have other pay frequencies, so maybe you run a weekly and a monthly payroll, you can organize your employee list by using filters. And if you click on the outline option here at the top of the screen, you'll see that the all employees can be filtered by pay frequency. That gives you a quick way of selecting all your monthly paid employees. If I had any, I'd be able to select weekly employees. And you can have further filters. In my case, it's by department, if you do your processing one department at a time. But to keep things simple for me, I'm just going to run for all employees. So that's what I've selected here. And if I want to hide this outline structure, I would just click outline again. So we've got everyone selected. I clicked onto Clear and Swap because I want to pay everyone on this pay date. And my next step will be to enter my employees' payments. So if you're looking through the tasks, you can see there is an Enter Payments option. A few things to mention. There is an option to reset your payments before you enter them. So if you have more of a variable payroll, where the number of hours worked changes each period, you could reset the hours values to 0 first, if you find that helpful. And there is also a timesheet entry option, which is a different way to enter hours worked by entering them as a grid. So you have a grid of all employees, and you just go through and type in the number of hours worked. But I'm going to use the Enter Payment screen, which is the most popular option. And I can select this from my payroll tasks or indeed from the payroll process map. Now, you may see this prompt asking if you want to check for updates to the current legislation. So you can check with our online legislation service by clicking yes, and you should find that there are no legislation updates found and your program is up to date. And that will then take you into the payment screen for the first employee that you've selected. So just to explain how this is all laid out, you can see the various pay elements organized onto tabs. So it starts with payments. You'll then see voluntary deductions, so deduction pay elements that you've set up yourselves. You've then got attachment of earnings orders. If you're deducting an attachment. There are company loan repayments. If you're deducting company loans. There's a screen to manage sickness and shared parental leave. So from here, you can check SSP and shared parental pay amounts, and you can easily add further absence if something is ongoing. And then on the next tab, the summary gives you a summary of the payments and deductions. So it tends to be totals. This is where you can check things like pension contributions, so your tax, national insurance, and student loan. You'll then see a load of information, and these are the figures used in the calculations that Payroll does for you. So these can be viewed, printed if needed. And there is a section if you wanted to use it to record your own notes for the payroll, which would be also visible within the employee record on the history tab. So the idea is you would check the payments for the current period, you would make any necessary changes. I'd suggest you have a quick check of the summary to make sure you're happy with all of these main deductions and the net pay value. And to move on to your next employee, you can click on the Save/Next button. So that's moved us on to my next employee. This employee also has a fixed salary. Maybe they've received a bonus this month. So that can be entered like so. I'd have a quick check of the summary, make sure I'm happy, and click Save Next to move on. So pretty straightforward with the fixed salaries there. I do have one employee where I have recorded some statutory absence. So I have an employee who started her maternity leave this month. So I've already been through to record the maternity details. And because I've done that, the statutory pay will calculate automatically. And if I click onto the summary tab, you'll see that I do have an amount next to statutory maternity pay. So this has been calculated based on the absence dates that I've entered. But it does mean I'll need to make an adjustment to the employee's basic pay because currently I have their full salary entered and I've also got the maternity pay on top. Now, if you have a company maternity scheme where you would pay your employee their usual gross pay made up of statutory pay and then topped up with company pay, you can use the Make Up Basic option to do an automatic adjustment to their payment value. That's really simple to use. You start by entering the full amount of salary or basic pay you want the employee to receive. You'd come to the Summary tab and you would click Make Up Basic. You'll then see a message telling you that a payment will need to be reduced. And if this is the payment you want to reduce, it's salary in my case, you would click Yes to continue. And that has automatically reduced the salary. So my employee's total gross pay is their usual basic, and it is made up of reduced salary plus statutory maternity pay. Now, if you're not using Make Up Basic, what you would need to do is to manually calculate the amount of salary due to the employee. So refer to your company processes to work out how much you want to pay them for the time they were at work, and then you can enter the relevant values against the salary just here. So you would work your way through each of the employees. I'm just going to save the fixed salary amounts. I do have some hourly paid employees. So for these ones, I enter the hours worked and their hourly rate has already been entered. So they get paid by the hour. So I'm entering number of hours worked. And then I have one last employee who's actually a new starter that joined me this period. And again, if they haven't worked for the full period, you would need to make an adjustment to their salary. So do a manual calculation and either adjust the hours value or the rate. And that way you're only paying them for the days that they need to be paid for. Now, if you're in the middle of enter payments, here's a quick tip for you, and you need to make a change in the employee record, or you need to look something up in the employee record. You don't have to close out of the enter payment screen, because what you can do is you can click this employee button above the payments tab. That will then take you straight into the employee record, where you can view the relevant details, make any changes as required. And then when you close out, it takes you back to where you were within the pay run. So pretty useful if you're in the middle of a payroll and you just realize that perhaps you need to make a change in the employee record. You don't have to cancel out and start again. You can access it from this option at the top. So I've got all the payments entered for the current period. So this was my last employee in the list. I would then click on to close. And if you take a look at the employee list, there's a few key columns to always keep an eye on. So we have a last updated column. So this tells us what pay date was the last pay date to be completed or updated within Sage Payroll. So for most of my employees, it was the 30th of June, but I do have a new starter who's never been updated before. There is a last FPS date column. This tells us the pay date of the last FPS that was sent to HMRC. And we have this last calculated column. So this is the pay date used the last time that payments were entered and saved. So you can see I've been through and I've entered payments for all of my employees for the 31st of July. Now, what you would do after entering the payments depends on whether you have our pensions module. If you do, you would run a pension assessment. There is an option to do this in the process map and on the payroll tasks. And just to quickly show you, if you do have hourly paid staff, another way of entering the hours worked is through timesheet entry. So I mentioned this earlier, but it organizes into a grid with the hourly payments that you've chosen to include in timesheet entry. And if, for example, I was working through overtime hours, I've got a quick way of kind of entering the information here for all the relevant employees, and then I can save them all at the same time. So just an alternative for hourly paid staff to go in through the enter payments screen. So let's have a bit of a recap of where we're up to in that process. So we started off by setting our process date. That was the date that the employees received their pay. What we then did is we entered the employees' payments. Now, if required, you can run the reset payments wizard if you want to clear any values first. And you can use timesheet entry as a quick way to enter hours worked for hourly paid staff. Once you've saved those payments, if you have our pensions module, your next step is to run a pension assessment, and that deals with enrolling employees into pension schemes if they have become eligible. And we do have other webinars that cover pensions and the pensions module, and you can catch up with recordings of those webinars from our help centre. Quick reminder of the main features of enter payments. So as you saw, the payments and deductions are split into tabs. You enter hour and rate values generally. If you need to open the employee record, you've got that quick link at the top. And once you're happy with that individual's payments, you can click Save/Next to move on to the next employee. So once the payments are entered, your next step is to produce pay slips and reports. Now, the pay slips need to be issued to employees on or before the pay date. So that is a legal requirement, and I'll show you a few different ways of producing pay slips. But there are also payroll reports that we'd recommend that you run for your own records. So I'm going to show you a couple of those in the demo. Now, when it comes to pay slips, you do have some flexibility in Sage 50 Payroll. There are 3 ways of producing them. Our recommended option is online pay slips, where you would upload the payslips to Sage HR online services, which comes included with your payroll subscription. And employees can then view their payslips, including historical payslips, by logging into the web portal or by using the mobile app. Second option is emailing payslips. So they can be emailed from Outlook, or you can enter SMTP settings, and you can set passwords for those payslips as well. And the third option is printing the payslips. So you could either print onto plain paper, or you might have payslip stationery that you've bought from somewhere that's compatible with Sage Payroll. Now, if you want to read more about the different methods of producing payslips, you can click on the links in this handout, but I will show you the printed ones and the online ones in the next demo. So let's return back to the demo. So we've got our payments entered for our July pay date. The next step I'm going to run is the pre-update reports. So it's found just here in the payroll tasks and just here in the process map. And the first folder you see within any report browser are your favorites. So there will be reports that you'll want to run each time you process a payroll. And to favorite a report, you simply click the star next to the name of the report, and that adds it to this list. Starting with payslips, if you're printing onto A4 paper, which most of you will be, you will need to find a laser payslip layout. So select the laser folder underneath payslips, and you can see there are a few different formats. So have a read of the description if you have stationery that you're trying to match up to, or perhaps just preview the reports and pick the one that you'd like to use. So I have added this first one to favorites by clicking on the star, like so. And this is just a standard laser payslip, which prints 2 per A4 sheet. To view the report on screen, you can preview it. So if you select the report you want to run and click preview, you might see this prompt if you've set employees up to receive email or online payslips. And that's just asking if I want to include them in the printed version. So it depends whether you want a full set of payslips, maybe to save for your own records, or whether you're printing them for those employees that don't use an online method. But I'm going to click yes to include all employees. And what you'll see here is a preview of the payslip, and it's got a bit of a background in the preview, which shows you what it would look like if printed onto stationery. And then all of the details of the payslip, so the salary in this case, tax, national insurance, and pension contributions. You've then got all of the year-to-date values, employee's tax code and name, and then the employee's net pay or take-home pay at the bottom. Now, if you're going to be printing them and you don't have stationery, please be aware that the only things that print out are the text values and the numbers. But if you want to keep that background and you want to print that out onto plain paper, instead of printing directly from here, you can export the report, which will include the background as well. So if I click onto export and save it as a PDF, so I'm going to call this one July Payslips. I'll just pop this on my desktop for now. That gives you an exact copy of these payslips, which you might keep for your own records, or you might use to print out for your employees if you're printing onto plain paper. So that's a report. Sorry, that's a payslip. And I'll just briefly mention the 2 reports that we recommend as a minimum. So they're found in the summary folder, and it's the payment summary reports, part 1 and 2. So you can print them landscape or portrait, contains much of the same information. And if I just preview part 1 for you, I'm just going to include all pay frequencies. You'll see this gives you a breakdown, gross to net, of this period's payroll. So we've got all of the PAYE tax, employees' national insurance, and pension. It calls out any statutory payments. So I've got parental payments here, and then we've got the net pay. This is the total net pay that I'll be paying out from my bank. And then part 2 Compliments Part 1. And this contains a bit more detail on the employer side of things. So employer NI contribution, employer pension, also a note of the tax codes and NI categories. So we would suggest running those ones for your records. I've added all of them to my favorites. So I've got a payslip and I've also got payment summary reports. Now, if you're going to be doing your payslips online, you'll need to complete a setup process by following some steps in your online services settings. And we cover those in our online payslips webinar, which will be coming up later this month. But once everything's set up, it's really simple to upload all of your employees' payslips, and they will then receive an email notification or a push message if they're using the app, telling them when their payslips are available. So I'll just show you the process in Payroll. If I click onto Upload Online Payslips here on the left-hand side, it shows me the 5 employees that I've set up for this option, including their gross and net pay values. And then I have 2 choices. I can publish them immediately, so the employees get the notification now and they'll be able to view that payslip. Or I can schedule it to be published on a future date. So maybe I want them to get their payslips a couple of days before pay date on the 29th of July. So that'll be my publish date. And then when I click Publish Payslips, it will upload them to the online portal, but they will be in a pending state until that publish date. And that's when they will be made available to the employees. So these payslips have been successfully set to publish on the 27th or 29th of July, I think it was. And if I was to log into the online portal as an admin user, so this is your Sage HR portal, you can check on the payslips that you've uploaded. And you can see that I have my 5 pending payslips due to be published on the 29th. And I can view the details from here if I want to. I can view it on screen like so. And this is the same view that your employee would get at the point those payslips are published. So as I say, more information on the online payslips is in our other webinar. So it'd be great to see some of you there. So those are the essential reports, payment summaries, part 1 and 2, and then a payslip, depending on which format you have chosen to run your payslips. As I say, there is more information on each of these options in the handout if you follow these links. And a reminder of those recommended reports, payment summary part 1 and 2. They're found in the summary folder within the pre-update reports option. And a quick tip for you, if you want to bundle the reports together and create a reports pack as a single document, you can set up what we call a report selection. So a great little feature to streamline your reporting. You can follow the link to read more. We will have webinars on that in the future. So up next, now that we've produced our payslips and reports, if you're happy with the information on those reports, is to update the records. Now what this step does is it completes payroll for that period and it adds the current period values into the year to dates, creating a historical entry in the employee record. So it wouldn't be possible to make changes to these payment values once you've updated records, unless you were to restore a backup or use the rollback wizard. Once updated, you have the option of posting the nominal link, and that will send salary journals straight through to your account software, your Sage account software. And we're covering nominal link this afternoon, in fact, on our nominal link webinar. And then if you've got anyone leaving you, you would run the leaver wizard at this point before you submit the information to HMRC. So let's pick up the demo at this point. I'll just switch the camera off again and put us back into full screen mode. So we've uploaded our pay slips, I've checked the payment summaries, and I'm happy that the figures on all the reports are correct. So next step is to update the records, which is this step here in the payroll tasks. You will see the reminder that you need to print your pre-update reports first. I've already done that, so I'm going to click yes to continue. And then within the Update Records wizard, it explains what the wizard does. So it's updating cumulative figures, updates the payment history, automatically takes a backup of your data. But we also strongly recommend at this point that you take a manual backup of your data, just in case something happens to your PC or laptop and you need to recover back to this point if you set up on a new PC. So backup option is found here. So you can click on this option here. You can run through the backup wizard and save a backup to a location of your choice. And once you've completed that backup, you would continue through the Update Records wizard, where it's confirming here that I'm paying monthly employees. There are 11 of them to be updated for this period. When I click next, I can actually see the names of the employees. When I click finish, you'll see the progress bar move across, and then we get the confirmation all 11 employees have been updated. And just a message there reminding us to run the leaver wizard if anyone's leaving your employment. So now that we've updated records, if we take a look at the last updated column, you can see this now shows our 31st of July pay date. So that confirms that we've completed payroll for that pay date. And if we take a look in the employee record, go on to the history tab, we now have a historical entry for that pay date as well. So these values are now included in the employee's year-to-date values stored in their record. Now, next step would be to process leavers if I have any leavers, which I don't happen to have in this particular demo. So it'll take us on to our final step, which is to submit the payroll to HMRC. And this is all done as part of what's known as a full payment submission, or FPS for short. So this needs to be sent on or before the pay date, or it will be classed as a late submission. And to run it, I'm just going to click on the link in the payroll tasks, full payment submission just here. Now you can ignore the warning. This won't come up for you. This is just because I'm in a training room and I'm not making a live submission. But when you do this, it'll take you through to this first screen, telling you that you're about to send a full payment submission. You would click on to continue, and it will confirm your gateway registration and company details. So these are all saved in the e-submission settings and the company settings. And they're the same credentials that you would use to log into your PAYE online account. I would then click on to submit, and it'll give me a summary of the submission. So from here, for each employee, you can see the tax period the submission relates to. There's a liability figure, which is made up of the tax, national insurance contributions, and any student loan repayments. And you'd also see starter and leaver details where applicable, if you've had any new starters or employees that have left you this period. It also calculates the total liability made up of the tax, national insurance, and student loans. So this is what you would owe to HMRC. So this is what you're submitting to them. And when I click on to submit, what will happen for you is you'll see a progress bar move across the screen. And when it's finished, you'll see confirmation the submission has been successful. So you can view these details in the submission log if you need to look back on them. But I'm going to close out, and you'll see that my last FPS date column now matches last updated, and they are both showing the 31st of July pay date. So that tells me that I've completed my pay run and I'm all up to date for tax month 4. So just going to recap those steps for you before we move into month end. So we have now updated the records, which has saved the current payment values to the year to dates and created that historical entry. If required, you could post the nominal link at this point and run the leaver wizard for anyone that was leaving. Final step was submitting to HMRC as part of a full payment submission. So this is how you report any starters and leavers. It contains the employee details, taxable payments, and that liability made up of the tax, national insurance, and student loan. Don't forget your deadline for an FPS is on or before employee's pay date, so make sure you send it on time. So that is the pay run, but I do want to briefly touch on your month-end tasks, just to complete the picture here. So once you've completed all pay runs within the tax month, you are ready to complete your month-end tasks. This will involve running a P32 report, which breaks down your liability for the month and shows you the amount that you need to pay over to HMRC. If required, submit an employer payment summary or EPS. Now this reports adjustments to your liability, usually statutory payments that you're recovering. And then the third step is to make your payment to HMRC by the payment deadline, which is the 19th of the following month if you pay by cheque, or the 22nd of the following month if you pay electronically. Now, before you run through that month-end checklist, do be aware that the payroll calendar runs from the 6th day of each month. So tax months start on the 6th and end on the 5th day of the following calendar month. So if you are running a weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly payroll, do check your calendar and make sure you've completed all pay dates that fall within the tax month. So not the calendar month, it's the tax month finishing on the 5th day of the following calendar month. And if you find it useful, we do have a tax calendar that you can download from our help centre. So there's a link to that there on the slide. When you're ready though, you would run a P32 report. So this is a sample of the report and the information it contains. So the first 4 items are the items that have been submitted as part of your FPS. So that's the total tax, student and postgraduate loans, and national insurance contributions. So that's employee and employer contributions. But then there are other items that may affect your liability, such as employment allowance you're reclaiming, statutory payments you've recovered, apprenticeship levy payments that you might need to pay out. And once those adjustments are taken into account, you're left with the total amount to pay to HMRC. Now, if you're claiming employment allowance, you'll have submitted your claim at the start of the tax year. So HMRC already know that you'll be deducting the employer's national insurance up to £5,000 per tax year. But for any of the other items, so if you're reclaiming statutory pay or paying apprenticeship levy, you will need to do an EPS submission for that month, which will report that additional information. So these are the reasons why an EPS would be required. So recovering statutory payments is the main one. Suffered CIS deductions that you need to report. You're paying apprenticeship levy, or if you haven't employed anyone this month and you need to inform HMRC that no payment is due. And the deadline for that submission is the 19th of the following month. So let's finish the demo by taking a look at the P32 and the EPS. So quick tip here, if you're on the payroll tasks, you can actually access both of these options from the links that you find just underneath. So this links section has a link for the P32 report and the employer payment summary if you need to submit one. So I'm going to start by running the P32 report. I'm just going to click on this option here. In the report criteria, I just need to confirm the tax month I'm running it for. So July is tax month 4. I can then see a preview of the report on screen. So I can see PAYE income tax, gross national insurance. So that was all sent in my FPS. I still have employment allowance to claim. So I'm claiming that this month, but I've already submitted my EPS for the employment allowance. But this month, for the first time this year, I'm recovering statutory pay for the maternity pay. So because these items are reducing my liability, so my total amount due, £2,838, I need to report these values by submitting an EPS. So I could export the P32 if I want to save it for my records. But because I need to send an EPS, I'm going to run it from the payroll links. You'd simply choose the reason you're sending one. So in my case, I've recovered statutory pay. It'll confirm the tax month based on your process date. It'll then show the statutory payment recovery values for the tax year to date. Now, these are only parental payments. You can't recover statutory sick pay. You have to fund that yourself. CIS deductions suffered can be entered manually, if applicable. And then apprenticeship levy payments, if these have been calculated, they will appear in this box. So I'm going to complete the wizard and just dismiss that warning. And then the EPS submission, so monthly submission, end of the month, click on to continue and submit. It'll just give high-level details. And then when I click on to submit, that is then sent to HMRC. So they now have the full picture. They've already had the FPS. They now know about the statutory pay I'm recovering. And it means when I make my payment, I'll be paying the amount that HMRC are expecting. So that actually brings us to the end of the presentation. We've got a couple of minutes left, but I will stick around a little while longer just to make sure that we have answered most of the questions that have come through as well. Just to mention the further support that's available to you, starting with some additional webinars that we're running this month. So today's session was Get Your Payroll Done, but we also have webinars on starters and leavers, the HMRC secure mailbox, the nominal link, that one's this afternoon at 2 p.m, mastering mistakes, it's all about error corrections, and online payslips. You can find all the details at sage.co.uk/webinars or by following the link there on the handout. Another great resource if you're after help is our online help centre. You can get that at sage.co.uk/help or by clicking help icons in Sage 50 Payroll. If you search for the topic that you're interested in, you can then read our support guides, or if you need further help, you can click on the Get in Touch tab, and that will explain the best way to get in touch with our support team. Another fantastic learning resource is Sage University at sageu.com. And from here, you can access our e-learning courses, online certification, and bite-sized learning on a range of payroll topics. So get yourself signed up if you haven't already at sageu.com. So as we are reaching the end of the webinar, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us at the webinar today. Do stick around if you have any final questions. You can submit them in the Q&A, and we will respond to those in that same area. And if you take this opportunity to download the handouts, this is your last chance really to grab a copy of those. Simply click on the documents icon, that piece of paper icon, and you can download them from there. We will send you a follow-up email containing a link to a recording of today's session. So look out for that arriving later this afternoon. And as you exit the webinar today, you'll be invited to complete our webinar survey. So I'd really love to know what you thought of the session today. So if you do have any feedback, do complete that at the point you leave us, or there'll be a link to do it in the follow-up email. So for anyone leaving now, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to go on to mute just for a little while, just to check that all the questions have been covered off, and then I'll be back to say goodbye when we're ready to close the session. So I'll speak to you shortly. Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for sending those questions through. It looks like Paddy's done a fantastic job answering all of those for us. So I hope you found those answers useful. As we haven't had any new questions come through in the last couple of minutes, we are going to wrap up at that point. So thanks once again, everyone, for joining us at the webinar today. We'd love to see you on some of our other sessions this month, so do get yourself signed up. But from myself and the team here at Sage, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.